Today I just wanted to talk to you about dealing with political chaos. There seems to be a lot of political chaos in our world that never seems to go away no matter what we do. Christians need to talk about how to deal with that and what kind of lives we should live in the midst of it, because the political chaos doesn't seem like it's going to go away. Every week there's something new. This week it's the Roger Stone situation, but next week it's going to be something else, and the week after that it's going to be something else. So we got to figure out how to help people through life and how to deal with that. What are the accusations that are flying around now in both directions? There are things like abuse of power, corruption in government, but we've always had abuse of power in government. History has always shown us corruption in government. There are accusations of interference in regular governmental processes. And so we're like, what are we supposed to do with this? Some people respond with rage. There's a lot of anger in our culture that people are just upset, and they take it out on each other and they take it out on other parts of their lives. Some people respond with apathy. They're just like, I don't care. I don't want to hear about it. Don't talk to me about that. And so other people try to justify it. Well, this, or, well, it was okay because of this. And in that situation, it was all right. But for this person, it's not all right. And other people are just disgusted. They're disgusted with the whole political situation now, the way the environment goes. So we have to talk about how do we deal with this as Christians? How do we deal with it as people? Just being responsible people. So one of the directions my mind went in is that I was thinking about what are the movies that are popular, because often art reflects life. So I looked back at the most popular movies of 2019 to see what kind of movies they were, and I was pretty surprised to see that they're almost all fantasy and comic book kind of movies. Endgame, Lion King, Frozen 2, Captain Marvel, Spider-Man, Star Wars, The Rise of Skywalker, Aladdin, and The Joker. So those are some of the popular movies from 2019. And I think, well, why are these comic book movies so popular? All these fantasy things and cartoon things? And I think it's because these fantasy movies provide an escape from life for us. Because reality has just been too upsetting. Our political situation right now, the world situation with some of the rogue countries doing the things that they're doing. We like to then escape from that and go to a movie theater and see a movie where justice wins and where goodness wins and where they're actually heroes. And the heroes do what heroes are supposed to do. They are good people that fight evil, and they actually win against evil. And so, we want things to be this way, and they're just not. They're just not. And we all know that there really is no hope that they ever will be, and that's why we immerse ourselves in fantasy. We struggle to live with that disconnect as to reality will never be this way, but in the movies we can make it whatever we want to make it. So I'm thinking, so where's the help for life? So here's what I came up with is, how to help people through this. And my first point is that real life will never match up to your ideal or to any ideal. Real life is just too messy. It doesn't come together that way. There are too many bad people. There are too many hustlers and cheaters and liars. And, real life will never measure up to your reality. So if you focus on that part, if you focus on what's really going on all the time, it'll just produce anxiety in us, in you, in me. It's just very upsetting to see what people are really like and how they respond when the pressure is on. And of course now the pressure is almost always on. So if you focus on that, if you focus on how bad things are, anxiety is just going to grow. There's just going to be more anxiety all the time. So what I'd say is you have to dock your boat in another port. You have to look at what, instead of sort of docking your boat in anxiety that real life brings. It reminded me of the words of Jesus in Matthew 11, where he says, "Come to me. Come to me if you are tired and weary and you are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." And so instead of just letting the anxiety of real life chew us up alive, what we have to do is just sort of find some peace in Jesus and think about the ideal that he is and the ideal that he brings to us, so that we can relax and have some kind of bearing or mooring in a different reality that's not the anxiety producing reality, but instead is just Jesus, and we find our peace and our rest in him. So not only are we just docking our boat in another port, instead of docking it in the anxiety that real life brings, we're docking it in Jesus. I think a second thing that we can do to help ourselves and help each other is to change the conversation. And by change the conversation, I don't mean that when somebody starts talking politics, you say, hey, did you taste those new cookies I baked? Or, hey, what about that basketball team? No, I don't mean change the conversation that way. What I mean is that it has been easy for many people in the last number of years to give in to a spirit of complaint. And there are so many things to complain about that we find something there's a lot to complain about, and it's easy to complain, and we find ourselves just bogged down with this spirit of complaint. But in Ephesians, Paul writes to us and says that we should let our speech be productive, that we should focus on wholesome things to talk about, rather than just complaining all the time. And if we're complaining all the time, it's just going to make us more angry. It's going to make us more bitter. Sometimes, like parents tell their children, just stop complaining. Find the good part of it, and let's focus on the good part. Instead of focusing on what's wrong, let's focus on what is right. And I think those are good watchwords for ourselves in this era, where we have to focus on what is good and what is right. We have to find the good part and focus on that. Rather than giving in to a spirit of complaint, we have to change the conversation. And you may think, well, and what I'm seeing in the news now and everything that's happening, there is no good side. But there is. There's always a good side. We have to find it, and we have to dwell on that and talk about it. So instead of focusing on the reality of life and all the anxiety that brings, we have to focus on the reality of the kind of peace in our souls that Jesus brings. And we have to change the conversation. That's number 2, as I just said. Instead of a spirit of complaint, we need to find the good and the positive parts and talk about that. And the third thing I would say is that we should be change agents. What's happening, I think, in the world is that there's so much bad going on, and there's so much anxiety and hostility between people that we let it change us. That we are letting it make us more angry people. We are letting it make us more upset. We are letting it divide relationships. We are letting it ruin friendships. And instead of letting it change us, we have to be the change agents. Don't let it change you. Instead, you be the one to change it. Change the conversation, change our attitudes, change the way we treat people. Now, of course, this isn't just closing our eyes to reality. Of course, everything influences us, the things that happen. But we can be the ones to bring a whole different conversation to the table. We can be the ones to bring a different attitude to the table, so that we become the change agents, rather than letting everything change us and us being sort of victims of our circumstances. we can be the change agents. We can create some distance between us and what's happening in our government and in our society, and instead we can be the change agents. I remember one time when we were in Russia, and we were staying with a family, and there was a lot of things going on in Russia at the time, and we said to the family that we were staying with, "Isn't this all upsetting to you? You know, what's happening in Moscow, and you know, the events and what the government is doing?" And he basically said, "No, we don't pay any attention to them. That's their world. We have our world. It's completely separate from their world, and they can do whatever they want. But what's happening in Moscow has nothing to do with what's happening in our city. And so we just have to live our lives in our city, and it's a whole different kind of environment." And so instead of letting it change them, they were creating some distance between their lives and the political mayhem that was going on, and just be the people that they needed to be in their world. I remember, reading about Jesus. In the Old Testament, of course, the tabernacle and the temple were protected so that sin could not invade sacred space, and so that was protected from ritual uncleanness. But when Jesus came to earth, he was out and among the people. And one of the questions that he was asked is, "Aren't you afraid that being in touch with these sinners is going to contaminate you?" And basically the way Jesus acted, he says, "Oh, that doesn't contaminate me. I'm the one who is the agent of change. And when I touch them, instead of them contaminating me, I heal them. And instead of me becoming ritually unclean, I forgive them and they become clean." And so Jesus didn't have to be afraid of being contaminated. He didn't have to isolate himself to protect himself from contamination. What he basically took the attitude of is, no, I'm going to be out there and among them, and I'm going to change them. They're not going to change me. I'm going to be the agent of change. I'm going to change the conversation. I'm going to be the one, I'm not going to succumb to the anxiety. I'm going to be the one that makes a difference in their lives. And so he affected them. And I think this is where the help for life is that I was thinking about when we're talking about what is happening in our world. And I'll just review the points that I said. Real life will never match up to your ideal, so don't expect it to. Find your rest somewhere else, because you will not find it in our political situation. Find your rest in Jesus. That's where the rest is. Secondly, change the conversation. Instead of a spirit of complaint, be a spirit of positivity. Find the good that's in the situation and dwell on the good, and not only dwell on the good, but converse about the good. Communicate that. And the third thing is, don't let it change you. Don't let it sort of victimize you. Instead, you be the change agent, and you create distance, and you be the one that affects the situation, so that we become agents for positive attitudes, positive change, and positive messages in a world that's just gone crazy with negativity, anger, and complaint.